pioneer, okay, my sister, my very dear own sister that I'm so proud of, Chief Mrs. Anita Nana Okuribido. She leads a reputable women organization, and she is notably as the chairman of Women Green Energy Institute. She's the chairman of Women in Sustainable Power Africa, in that case, chairperson. That is the Women in Sustainable Power Africa Network. She is the president of Digital Network for Women Empowerment, national president of Women in Renewable Energy Association, the CEO and managing director of Siman Engineering Ltd, and executive chairperson of SymphoAgro-Tech Company Limited, founder of Smiling Siman Greenbuild Foundation. Chief Anita Nana Okuribido is a very passionate person. She's passionate about encouraging women to take leadership roles in energy sector. I know Chief Nana Okuribido personally. She is also our senior board of director of board of African Views Organization. I work closely with her. This woman is tireless in her effort to do something that's great to make Africa proud, to lift women out of poverty, to change the Nigerian constitution on women's need and the provisions for women in the constitution. She is just an amazing, amazing, amazing person that I'm so happy to bring to your attention what she's doing and how we can factor what she's doing into the concept of cultivation and preservation of wealth in the African world. Without further ado, I thank you very much. Please welcome Chief Nana Anita Okuribido. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wale. I would say that's an encomium, for a little me. And I will also, of course, express my gratitude for the acknowledgement by Otumba Ashiru. He's in such a family that I've known for a while, but he really stands out because he changes the shift. When we say somebody gives a paradigm shift to a sector, he has done so in the commerce sector. Wherever he is, he has the Midas touch. So I'm so happy to meet you, Otumba, in this platform. So good morning.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the distinguished personalities here at this moment and all those who are listening to us, listening to African Views from all over the diaspora. Like Dr. Wale has invited me to this 6th edition of the Spirit of Peace and Prosperity Summit. I find it really, really very insightful. And my only wish is not, and it's not going to be one of the dialogues that once we end, the forum, it ends there. But trusting African Views, being led by Dr. Wale, the executive director, and eminent board directors, I know we will take it to the next level, and we make sure that we change the narrative, individually or collectively. 1,000%. presentation is being shared on the screen, and I'm in the introduction right now. The reality of Africa as a poverty-ridden continent is a globally appreciated fact, which we all know. Dr. Wali has mentioned it, and Dr. dwelt, extensively on it. I only want to add that the face, poverty has the face of a woman because the woman is in the front line. She is in the forefront. She bears the brunt of it all. While the African continent is rich in terms of natural resources, it has remained economically weak over the centuries, and in fact remains the weakest continent economically. I would say it is the weakest link. This uncertain paradox has led economists, historians, and scholars into investigative analysis aimed at understanding the fundamental causes and the root causes of Africa's poverty, and by extension, sustainable solutions to it. Historians and economists alike all highlight the common themes of slave trade. Slave trade happened many, centuries back, but I can still tell you Africa is still, in this slave trading. We have colonialism. We are still colonized. Is it by technology, by financial tools, IMF, and so on and so forth? We are colonized. Not to talk of corruption that Dr. Wali mentioned, Otumba Ashiru mentioned. That one has eaten so deep into the fabric of the economy of Africa. And bad governance, apart from Rwanda, that I will say is scoring 80%, for good governance. Every other country in Africa has bad governance as major factors that either plunge the continent into or is keeping it in poverty. We are inhabitants of the world's largest continent, and arguably, in terms of the combined advantage of cultural heritage and resource potential, the richest continent. We have all the potential, Dr. Wali mentioned it, but are we maximizing it? Yet our Africa remains the major and most frequent destination of loans and aids and biggest home of international debts. Why should that be? Poverty eradication sits at the heart of many other societal and global challenges like health, peace, and energy. As individuals who are able to generate good income for themselves and families are less likely to be victims of treatable diseases. Look at what happened during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. I kept saying, I said, thank God that Africa is not so hit, because if it came, so hard on us, we don't have the technology, no medical technology to take charge of it. We don't even have the infrastructure. But God, being God, knows how to meet us at the point of our needs. And, it was not so bad, on Africa. We talk about crimes or lack of, access to clean and sustainable energy. I am a forerunner and I'm in the forefront of sustainable energy in Nigeria and Africa. And I can tell you, even to just plant trees, to protect our environment, Africans don't find it easy to do that. Instead, we keep, going into deforestation to find fuel wood for cooking, when we can divert into clean gas cooking or solar cooking or clean stove cooking using bio-briquettes. When we examine the various factors responsible for Africa's poverty, we see that they exist in two major economic categories. those which cause Africa's plunge into poverty, and those which keep Africa from attaining its economic potentials, while an appreciation of both is crucial, to efforts towards sustainably growing Africa's wealth. The latter factors that keep Africa in poverty constitute the major blockers to eliminate through intentional and innovative practices if we must cultivate and preserve the wealth of Africa, which is what I am discussing today. I'm glad Otumba Ashuru mentioned that people like Awolowo, Chief Awolowo cultivated, the wealth of Africa, because, for example, he was the one that first established the broadcasting, institution, first in Africa, the first television and all that in Africa. But have we been able to preserve the wealth of Africa? That has not been happening. Cocoa House, and so many institutions, the University of Ibadan came out of Cocoa House, University of Ife came out of cocoa, wealth from cocoa, proceeds from cocoa. But have we been able to preserve? Interestingly, these latter factors represent the actions and, I would say inactions, of Africans, particularly its leaders. But when we say leaders, I want to say I'm part of the leadership. I'm part of the leadership. All of us here in this program, we are part of the leadership. But we seem not to be harnessing, our leadership qualities. The implication of this is that the ball is in our court and the power in our hands to usher in a new generation of sustainable wealth for the continent of Africa. Let us harness everything the potentials of Africa. So root causes of Africa's poverty, you have that diagram. Above the surface of the ground, you can see the symptoms clearly. But what about the deep root causes, which we really have to make sure that we use our eagle eyes to look into? African countries were once rich and powerful until a series of events which began in the 14th century evolved to the detriment of Africa's economic buoyancy. And over the centuries, while other foreign colonies who suffered almost similar economic histories have eventually risen above their poverty, Africa is yet to be able to crawl out of its poverty. We can talk of countries like Malaysia, Taiwan. They were even so poor, poorer than some countries in the African continent. But today, they have changed their narrative. Prior to the continent's fall into poverty after the 14th century, East Africa was connected to the Indian Ocean trade, a major source of that region's economic strength. And West Africa was home to the richest man that ever lived, the Malian emperor, Mansa Musa. We all did that in our history in the secondary school. African colonies developed, metallurgy that was at par with Europe and Asia, developed mathematical theories, the hieroglyphics from Egypt, and the intricate systems of government such as kingdoms, empires, and city-states, but all these have declined in Africa into poverty. And Africa's decline into poverty can be traced to the slave trade, colonial activities, and its aftermath and African leadership inadequacies post-independence, as we would see. We know about the slave trade. I won't read, the details of that, but I was discussing with my daughter, and she was shocked to know that, Ogun State played a big role in the journey of slave trade in Nigeria. And I'm like, we need to be teaching history, to our children. They must understand the root causes of so many of the economic importance. So I would not go into slave trade, but the slave traders would then, sell these slaves to the Americans and use some of the profits to buy the raw materials that the slaves produce, such as sugar, sugarcane, cotton. And I'm glad we are talking about cotton here, that we are going back into producing cotton in the Southwest, because backward integration of cotton would now boost, the fabric industry, the fashion designing industry, in Nigeria and in Africa. The lesson we learned in slave trade is that the people in charge in Africa hardly focused in using its resources to develop its own people. Instead, they were majorly interested in funding efforts to keep themselves in power through trading their own people for slaves for the Europeans. We also have colonization, which I mentioned earlier on. Like I said, colonization is still going on. Effects of colonization on Africa. Of course, it brought in, number one, increased poverty. Number two, economic isolation. Number three, loss of leadership. I will dwell more on that of leadership, as by replacing African leaders with European overlords, Africans were lacking vital skills in leading themselves in a modern world, such as business managers, government leaders, accountants, as well as, practical skills like construction workers, medical and professionals, and so on and so forth. So now we are in post-colonial Africa. I love Chief Obafemi Awolowo's vision. And of course, there's no way we can talk about post-colonial Africa without talking about Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. The enormous suffering and stagnation in the hands of their colonizers led Africans to start agitations for their independence. We all know how Chief Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and Kwame Nkrumah fought, tirelessly until some of these, our countries, gained back their independence. It was thought that when Africans govern Africa, that wealth would follow soon, but this did not happen. And it's still not happening. The leaders of the African independence movement promised the African people prosperity after independence, and to fulfill this, for most African countries, the solution was an economic system called African socialism. African socialism meant that many industries would be controlled by the national government, such as mining, construction, and plantations. It would then use all of the nation's resources to industrialize. At the time, manufacturing would mean significantly higher earning power for the economy, both in terms of foreign trade and wages for workers compared to agricultural jobs. In addition, it would make foreign goods more expensive by putting extra taxes on them. with the argument that if foreign goods are more expensive, then people would have to buy the more affordable local alternatives. Also, the leaders hope that with the foreign companies would have to come to their own countries, as with that, they wouldn't have to pay those extra taxes if they just moved some of their factories to Africa. But it didn't happen. And if it happened earlier on, we just could not sustain it because of lack of infrastructure. So post-colonial challenges, the exit of European colonial authorities and the governance of Africa by African leaders had Africa faced with these challenges. Trade restrictions, stifled the growth of African industries. The rapid spread of diseases like yellow fever, smallpox, malaria, and so on and so forth in the continent, which already lack adequate economic power to tackle them. All of these diseases are easily preventable in richer countries. And of course, Africa is still ridden with diseases as of this moment that I'm speaking. African socialism meant centrally planned economies, and these were less efficient than economies that have a lot of different business competing with each other. Part 2, cultivating and preserving the wealth of Africa. Looking back at the chain of events in Africa's economic history, it is evident that the ills which sustained Africa's poverty had been eternal factors: inadequate skill development, education, poor government, policies. As we all know, that the policy framework, guiding our, economics and best practices, even when they are established, they are not implemented. We have corruption in government and inability to effectively address disease outbreak. Today, compared to older years, Africa has been able to attenuate some of these challenges with the advert institutions like the African Union, which have helped reduce trade barriers between African nations, the investment in the building of stable democracies, and the creation of various agencies to cultivate African talent through education and skill development. So cultivating and preserving the wealth of Africa continued. I purposely put the picture of Zuma, networking with the Chinese president. I really would like to mention that Mandela and his team really fought hard to, remove apartheid. Zuma was part of that. He worked hand in hand with Mandela to achieve that freedom. But somehow, after cultivating, somebody like Zuma has not been able to preserve. He has been sent to jail for corruption. And I keep wondering, if Mandela was alive today, how would he react to this? So indeed, cultivating and preserving any nation's wealth isn't rocket science at all. If we take South Korea, for example, and examine how they rose out of poverty, we'd easily appreciate this. Cultivating and preserving Africa's wealth should be embarked on with that realization that Africa is not lacking in the natural resources needed to grow its economies, nor is it, lacking in cultural diversity that foster innovation and tourism. It's overwhelmingly evident that African nations are lacking in and therefore need strong governmental institutions and legal systems and upright leaders, selfless leaders, leaders who would think of how the structures they put on ground would outlive them and make the generations coming after them to have even a better life than theirs. We need upright leaders, truly interested in national development, nation building, and the continent's, economic advancement. People like Mandela. We celebrated Mandela's Day yesterday, and I was at the, dialogue, put up by African Views, and I'm so glad, of the insightful, discussions. These are the fundamental qualities that underpin developed nations. It is when these are achieved that remaining recipe for growing Africa's wealth will be sustainably and effectively administered, and they constitute transformative efforts around education. That's why Chief Obafemi Awolowo will continue to be my role model, my hero. He gave free education to southwest of Nigeria. Moral awakening, infrastructure, industrial development, and health. So investment in all-round and quality education is very, very key. Education brings knowledge, and knowledge is power. We all know that. And then awakening our religious institutions to their role in nation building. Our religious institutions must awaken to their role in nation building and make concerted efforts to serve as beacon of moral refinement. They should take their roles in character building notches higher, as Africa's economic problems can be traced almost entirely to morally bankrupt leaders, with almost every African nation since dawn of modern civilization being continually plagued with leaders unable to rise above their own selfish interests and power lust, to the detriment of the people of Africa. Priests, pastors, imams, and the clergy must remember that one of the most effective ways to teach morality is through leading by example, as of course did our own Lord Jesus Christ, Prophet Muhammad, and the Buddhist leaders. Also, we have the responsibility of speaking the truth. We always say that the truth will set us free. We need to speak the truth to our political leaders, not to be afraid that if we told them the truth, they would edge us out of the benefits. I always like to say this: once we as individuals, we are focused and we have our own trade, you have carved a niche for yourself, no government can deprive you of having the economic benefits of your country. Because when you proffer solutions to communities, communities will look for you, because people want poverty to be alleviated. And if you are in that value chain of alleviating poverty, definitely you don't have anybody to fear. Recently, Nigeria lost one of the religious leaders, Prophet Joshua. People didn't really care about the kind of how would I put it? The denomination that he led, how he led it, or not, but people cared about the way he actually was selfless and gave back to the community, the way he made people to increase their earning power through skills. And this religious leader was buried like he was even, I would say, a president in Africa. Not like somebody who had a corner in a little village in Ijegun or somewhere in Lagos. He was given a befitting burial, and people crunched, the burial, his funeral, to give him the last respect because he touched lives. We need to really make sure as individuals or collectively, we bring peace to ourselves, to our communities, because you do not give what you do not have. If you have peace, you give it, and we have to cultivate it and make sure that we preserve it. Health is wealth. The health systems in most African nations are underperformant. This represents both poor health and hospital infrastructure and inadequate investment in disease prevention and control. A sick population is an unproductive population. This makes investment in health crucial to economic buoyancy, both on the personal and national levels. In Africa, health workers earn the lowest compared to other nations, and the health sector has witnessed one of the highest volumes of brain drain, where skilled medical professionals relocate to America, to Europe, to Asian countries to practice in order to earn better salaries, further predisposing Africans to poorer healthcare. The culture of increased investment in the welfare of medical workers must be developed besides massive improvements in healthcare infrastructure itself, and of course, the policy framework. I'm glad that Otumba Ashiru mentioned this, that somebody left Nigeria to go and be treated by another Nigerian for whopping 76,000 pounds or euro, when probably here, if the doctor was in Nigeria and treated him, maybe he would have paid some stipend for that. We need to have a rethink and make sure that in Africa, we stop the brain drain. Then massive investments in the industries of our competitive strengths. I don't want to dwell on this because Otumba Ashiru has actually given us hope. He has given us, I would say, a wonderful scenario of collaboration, of opportunities, particularly with the Odua investment. And I know that such other organizations like Odua Investments exist in all parts of other countries in Africa. Let us identify such, investment organizations like Odua, investments, and see how we can collaborate and invest. So I won't dwell on this. Then the same thing here. Then infrastructural development. I would like to dwell on the sector that I am very, conversant with, the energy sector, particularly electricity. Today, if Nigeria would produce or generate any, anything more than, let me say, 6,000 megawatts of electricity, we do not have the infrastructure for transmission to carry it. We do not even have the infrastructure for effective distribution of electricity in Nigeria. And the same thing goes for most countries in Africa. We need to have backward integration, develop, infrastructure for basics like electricity, water, even shelter. We need to start thinking of going into smart provision of electricity, smart generation of electricity, smart city. We need to use technology and develop our infrastructures. Because you cannot build on, a very weak foundation. We need to strengthen the foundation of the infrastructure we are going to build. So none of these areas would thrive without solid, enabling infrastructure, and therefore there lies the bedrock to industrial development. African nations still come last in this regard, with the poorest roads and road networks, the lowest access to electricity and clean energy. The same is true for our rail. I was looking at something, a video 2 days ago, that the rail tracks in Nigeria were, flooded by water, and the trains cannot even move. I've never seen that happen in advanced countries. In the aviation, and not to talk of communication infrastructures, we've been trying to connect with our business associates in West Africa in the last 1 week, and all what they've been telling us is that the internet is down because it is raining. Wow. In 2021. However, communication, however, have enjoyed considerable advancement in most African nations, but then it needs to be improved. And then other infrastructural sectors remain largely government controlled. We need to diversify, we need to decentralize, or else we will remain crippled due to the plague of unresponsive government agencies. So conclusion, I really want all stakeholders, particularly those directly responsible for development and growth in healthcare sectors, industries, education, business, energy, infrastructure, and agriculture, either within African nations or as Pan-African institutions, we should make more honest, deliberate, and concerted efforts to carry out, our mandates, and in more innovative ways towards cultivating and preserving Africa's wealth. And I would like to say here that I love to activate the SDGs from number 1, which is eradication of poverty, to the last one, which is collaboration and partnership, because we can't do it alone. Work alone and do not work far, but if you work together, and then we will work far. We have the institutions, we have the government, we have the blueprints. What we need most at this point is the strong will to work selflessly, to be more honest, to work more honestly and collaboratively towards this powerful and rewarding goal. Like Otumba Ashiru said, if you own 1% of 100%, it's better than being greedy that you want to own 100% of nothing at all. We need to be ready to put our Africa forward as a beacon of peace and unity, we need to harmonize our cultural efforts with traditional heritage and show the whole world that the African potential through harnessing its resources and well-endowed blessings towards great economic advances can be well achieved. Yes, we can do it. In unity lies strength. Thank you for listening.